I adore that this episode hinges upon Chapel bringing her best "let me speak to your manager" energy. Hello interwebs, I hope you're all doing well because I am so excited to talk about the latest episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, this time Season 2, Episode 5, Charades. And oh boy, I'll stay spoiler free up front and get into spoilers in just a minute, but I adored this episode. As many of you know, some of my favorite episodes of most Star Trek shows are kind of the silly, offbeat, weird ones that still have like a very important human message at its core, emotional message at its core. I think back to episodes like the baseball episode of Deep Space Nine being a personal favorite, pretty much all of Star Trek Lower Decks, which is why that show is my personal favorite modern Star Trek show, and last season's Strange New World episodes like The Serene Squall, and most pertinent to what we're saying today, Spock Amok. And if any of those episodes that I referenced, especially Spock Amok, resonate with you, you are going to love this episode, because not only is it another comedy-centered episode, it is another Spock comedy-centered episode. And I just adore the fact that so much of the comedy episodes of this show center on Vulcans. Like, there's been some good comedy that has come out of Vulcans, all the way going back to the original series and some of the, frankly, kind of racist jokes from McCoy towards Spock.
Please go. Somehow they do not look aesthetically agreeable on humans.
But they've always had this like general air of gravitas, and so I like that this show kind of plays a little bit more around with Vulcans in a really fun way, and just mining so much comedy from them. And this episode in particular, without spoiling the fun little conceit of the episode, is very much about a Vulcan comedy of manners, which feels like it just fits perfectly with Vulcans, and it works so extremely well. Everyone brings their A game to this story, but most importantly, Ethan Peck does. Ethan Peck is fantastic throughout the entirety of this episode, portraying a side of Spock that we've never gotten to see in any incarnation, be it Zachary Quinto's or Leonard Nimoy's Spock or even Ethan Peck before this. Like, we have never gotten to see this side of Spock, and Ethan Peck plays it so well in a way that still feels like Spock, and yet brings this unique twist to the character that is just so much fun. I was so impressed just throughout every episode how he just nailed every single scene in every beat that he needed to. Just such a great job here. But beyond that too, there are a couple of other surprises in this, namely some ties into Star Trek Discovery that I won't spoil for you, but it is a lot of fun there, as well as continuing some of the storyline with the love triangle between T'Pring, Spock, and Chapel in a way that actually surprised me, but I ended up really loving. If you had told me that this was the direction the show was going to take back in before the show even came out in season 1, whatever, I would have been like, I don't know, I'm reserved on that idea. But the way they've handled it this season and some of last season as well, I'm like, okay, I'm curious to see where you're going, because I've loved this so far, and I'm willing to give you the rope to do some fun things with canon. But if you are a stickler for canon, you might get a little, like, get your hackles up a little bit with this episode. But for me, I think it can work still with canon, but also I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with it. So I loved this episode. Frankly, I think this is my favorite episode of the season beyond episode 2. Episode 2, I think, is just in another ballpark altogether. If we just take that episode out, I love this episode as my favorite episode of the season, but episode 2 is just sort of a whole other thing. But this is a great episode, and I absolutely adored it. But to talk more specifics about it, let's get into spoilers. All right, let's talk about this episode because I have so many thoughts and they are all pretty much wonderful. We start off the episode where we learn that we're investigating this energy anomaly and we're wondering where these species, the Kirkovians, went, and there's a lot of downtime on the ship as they do that. We get the reiteration that Chapel is trying for this Vulcan fellowship, which we learned, I think, way back in the season premiere. And there's a little bit of awkwardness between her and Spock, and I love that Spock enters the turbolift and just stares Ramrod straight. It feels very Vulcan. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not avoiding you. I'm just being a Vulcan. It feels very, very Vulcan and awkward. I love it. And I also love seeing the scenes of Spock's socialization. He's just sort of like talking with Pike as they're cooking, and he says, I have to use a suppressant because humans smell bad to Vulcans. That is something, I don't know if it came up before then, but it was definitely a big issue in Star Trek Enterprise, where T'Pol constantly had an issue with the smell of humans on the NX-01.
I am curious, though, who previously occupied the cabin?
The odor. The human scent is difficult to mask.
So I really loved seeing that aspect of Star Trek Enterprise come into the show in a really fun way. I always love those like little details from that weird offshoot of Star Trek, like the Temporal War and stuff that get referenced. And then we also learn that T'Pring wants Spock to come to Vulcan in order to do his sort of ceremonial dinner before their wedding with T'Pring's family. And Spock's sort of like, all right, I'll do it. And he just sort of, I love that he sort of like just says, yeah, that sounds fine. And he talks to Pike where he's like, it's just, it's a big deal. But he says it like very flatly. But then when he does turn human and just a minute later on, he's like, oh my God, this is the biggest deal. She hates me. And just, you see like all the stuff that is left unsaid in Ethan Peck's performance when he plays Vulcans, but you can like read it that's there. But it's very suppressed, and it just goes to show how much work you have to do to really nail how to perform a Vulcan. So you can read all of these things, but they are under the surface. That is made explicit a lot more when we get to see Spock as a human. Just such a great, again, this is why I love the performance of Ethan Peck throughout this episode, because he just nails it. But then we get a quick little scene between Chapel and Spock in the shuttle, and Chapel sort of calling Spock out like things are awkward, and Spock sort of like kind of dancing around it because he's a Vulcan. He doesn't know how to express his emotions very well. But this does lead to an accident that does turn Spock human for some reason, as we'll uncover later on. I love Spock sort of fingers like, oh fuck, and then it cuts to the credits. Just a great use of a cut there. And when I saw that twist, I was like, in on everything this episode is. I'm very pumped, and it only just got better from here. So when we get back, we get to see Pike talking to Spock about how to be human, how he's feeling, things like that. They're going to try and do their best. And I love how Ethan Peck performs all of this emotion. Like, it's just a hair too much. Like, he is feeling all these different things, and it's not like he's going like so over the top all the time with his character. It's not like at an 11 every single moment, but if like a normal human who has been a human their entire life would have felt something at like a 6, Ethan Peck performs it at a 7, and he nails it so well, and I thought it was so good, and you get to see him flip through all these different things, including hunger, and I love it's like, this is a human thing, hungry, and I'm like, yes, Spock, hunger is definitely a human thing. We definitely have the emotion of hunger. I love that. And then I love this montage of sort of comparing Spock to how he was as a half Vulcan to him being a full human, and everything just going over the top. Like him eating all the bacon was hilarious. Him like freaking out at Kirk. I was like, I will get you. And Kirk's like, all right, I'll clean up. I was dying with that. I also love when he's speaking to La'an and she tells him he needs to do impulse control. He sort of hints that he's horny. Spock's a little bit horny. I love horny Spock. Always, you know, it's outside of his Vulcan 7 years, but apparently Spock is horny, and I thought that was great. But then we have a little bit with Chapel sort of is blaming herself. She feels like she's not good enough to solve this mystery. And that kind of goes into the next scene where she is kind of very much shut down by the Vulcan Fellowship guy, who is a complete asshole, very much reads like a Vulcan. He's like, oh yeah, you didn't copy and paste your statements. You know, that's something I've always taught when I'm writing stuff is like, don't reiterate word for word unless you're exactly quoting. But Vulcans are like, nope, you better copy word for word. That feels like a Vulcan thing. Like, yes, you should memorize. Just say the words. Why bother with rephrasing things? You know, who gives a crap? And sort of using that to like just malign her entire thing, and so her entire application. And so Chapel again just feels like she's not good enough. Like she's not worth enough. And I love the moment where Spock sort of shows affection to Chapel, saying, yeah, Vulcans can be jerks. And he, you know, shows, you know, emotional and physical affection for Chapel. So all the stuff that he probably would have done anyways as Spock, but a bit more emotionally through being a human. And, you know, that showcasing his affection towards Chapel. Just even like, not even just the hug, but him like touching her on the side. That's always a sign of like someone has, not like they're in love with you, but they have affection for you and care about you. Those like nice little like moments of touch. And Chapel clearly picking up and reading those signs from Spock as now that he's full human. I loved all of that. But then we get the thing that I thought was really cool was that Amanda Grayson comes on the ship, played again by Mia Kirshner, who I always know from the L Word, playing a interesting character on that show. If you know her character on that show, we'll leave it there. Controversial character, let's just say. But she also played Amanda in Star Trek Discovery Season 2. I don't think she was in Season 1, but Season 2. So it was nice to see her get to reiterate her performance as Amanda here, because I thought she did great in that season, and I was always wondering if we were going to see her again, because we still have Spock, and even though we don't have Michael Burnham. And I'm always curious if we're going to see Sarek at some point, too. It'll be interesting if he does show up at some point in the series. It'd be nice to see that actor back as well. But I love her, and I love this bit where Spock comes in wearing the hat, and he's like, it's regulation, and Pike's just like, yeah, yeah, cool. And like Pike's just trying to like play it right. Like, I'll play it cool, try my best, but he can't really bring himself to lie. I love Pike during this whole bit. It's very funny. And Amanda picking up on all of this and saying like, what's going on? We need to do this ritual with your wife because otherwise her mother's gonna blow up the engagement. And then she picks up on like, what's going on? And I love Spock just going like, Godmother, why do you always have to be like this? Just throwing that little like hissy fit a little bit. And she's like, all right, what's happening? I thought all of that was just hilarious and wonderful, and just the muscle spasms bit was just, I was loving all of this, and it spoke to Amanda just knowing her son. It showcased earlier on in this episode that she's a mother who knows her son. She knows how to read him, even if he's a human now. And I just loved her ability to just show affection and understanding to her child. Just what a wonderful mother Amanda is, and Mia plays it so perfectly. We then cut to the situation being explained by Pike to Amanda. I love like Spock stress eating in the background. That was so good. And Amanda's like, all right, I'm going to teach you how to lie. I've had to deal with this bullshit as a human living on Vulcan for so long, and as a mother having to just take all this crap. So I know how to teach you how to do this. And I'm like, oh yeah, Amanda's here. I love this for her. So that's great. And we also get like the ear extensions and stuff. And we have her kind of going through teaching human Spock how to be a Vulcan. All of this was also great. And we get this little sequence where like Amanda says, like, normally humans would be able to hold this, but I just bury it down. I bury the pain, put a smile on my face, even though Vulcans can handle this. And it speaks to like this idea of microaggressions, right? Where like some people just like have to like take it on the chin. So just people are gonna say shitty stuff to me as a woman or as a queer person, you know, or other marginalized person, and you just don't want to cause a stink. So you just like you eat it up and just like put on a happy face. And it's just a good metaphor for that. And then the rest of this with all the gals on the bridge teaching Spock how to be a Vulcan, and they're like, do I sound like that? Yes. Was hilarious. Loved that. Maybe a little bit racist, but, you know, he's a Vulcan. Who cares about his emotions? I'm sorry, I'm a terrible person. But then we also have Chapel deciding to go off with Ortegas and Uhura to try and help Spock with the Kirkovians. So we have that little plotline going on. But then this brings us to T'Pring coming on the ship. And again, I want to call out how good, I'm blanking on her name, but the actress who plays T'Pring is at playing a Vulcan, because when she comes on, she plays everything kind of emotionally flat, and yet you get the dynamic between her and her mother, and her and Amanda and Spock all at the same time. Like the second she comes on, there's like a notable sense of like, oh, I have this relief. And it's not like overly done, but you get the sense like, I've been dealing with my mother, don't want to deal with her anymore. And I love my mom too. I know that feeling very much of like, I love my mom. Being stuck in a room with her for a while can drive you mad. Have that relationship with my mom a lot too. Love you, Mom, if you're watching. And so, God, I'm gonna get in trouble now. But yes, that I understand that deeply. But I also like that, like, T'Pring likes Amanda. You get the sense she likes Amanda. Like, you understand, like, Amanda's like, I'm here for you, T'Pring, I get you, and T'Pring's like, I'm comfortable with her. It's like, you get the sense that they've met each other before, and there's, like, a history between them, and it's like, yeah, I like my mother-in-law, I'm friends with my mother-in-law. You just get that vibe, and just a wonderful, well-acted job there by the T'Pring actress. Again, blanking on her name. I also love this moment where Spock decides not to tell T'Pring about what's going on with him, because it makes sense in his moments. He doesn't want to overly burden her, but obviously that'll come out to bite him in the ass later on in the episode, but it makes sense emotionally, but you understand why he's wrong in that choice. So I liked that beat. Then we get the start of the ceremony, and we get T'Pring's mother and father coming in, and I like that Pike playing the kind of dad role for Spock, like cooking all this food and stuff, and I love the dynamic between T'Pring's mother and father. The dad is clearly like, oh yeah, like I'm the excited guy, and the mother's like, nope. And he's like, yeah, sorry, nope, got it. Like, he's very, like, she knows how to control him. And it's just, like, I've seen that dynamic play out in either direction, whichever it's been heterosexual, homosexual relationships, regardless of gender. But I've seen that dynamic between couples before, where one's just like, all right, yeah, I follow the lead of her in this situation. She's definitely the more domineering one. So I love all of that. And Pike's just like clear to support. It's like, I tried so hard. Like, and I just have to say, because I want to just call it out, Pike's reactions throughout this entire sequence, A+. Every moment we like cut away to Pike where he's like taking a drink because he's like, oh shit, something's going down, or like when he's like walking in with food and then like something's going on, he's like, oh nope, going away. Like just Anson Mount's performance throughout all of this, his just reactions to all of this as a human just watching all of it was hysterical. I was hysterical. I was dying the entire time. It was wonderful just getting that bit. And then all of the ritual stuff was a lot of fun, like Spock getting able to get through holding the pot in that initial bit. Amanda then not being super judgy towards T'Pring, but being like, I like you. She knows my thoughts. I've been opened up to her. I'm not going to be needlessly cruel. And then T'Pring's mother's like, nope, I'm going to be a total jerk and a dick to Spock. It's like, you do not deserve our daughter. Again, that very judgy mom. And I like Spock taking it all. And then going into the room and just like punching the walls, like, I can't do this anymore. Again, I love that. Ethan Peck just nailing that so much. I'm just like, I'm going to take this on the chin. Was just so great. We also have going on with this, Chapel goes with Uhura and Ortegas into the whatever the vortex thing was, and Ortega saying like, look, I'm not going to say no to doing this maneuver, so we're going to do it. And so then Chapel sort of has to admit that she has feelings for Spock, so that she can be able to be considered someone who can, argue with the Kirkovians to help fix him and give her the fix. I sort of joked about this earlier, but like, can I speak to Yellow? I would like to speak to Yellow, and I just had this energy of like, can I speak to your manager, please? Because these aliens are very utilitarian in their thought. It kind of felt like you were getting like a helpline, like you were just calling up like an Amazon help service, and like, can I speak to your manager? Sort of like that's the energy that it kind of felt, but through like a medical stuff. So I liked that dynamic, and her just being like, can I just speak to your manager? I need to say this, and then having to admit that she has feelings for Spock was a solid thing. And Uhura and Ortegas being like, yes, we all know, just admit it. But then this all led to the latter half of the episode, which still had some funny bits. So I thought what hit harder for me during the latter half of this episode was the emotional stuff that worked so well, where Pike tries to have charades happen because to like delay everything, getting us the title of the episode, which was funny. But then Chapel coming in and giving Spock the cure, and they kind of admitting their feelings, but Chapel just stopping him just at the last minute. And you're like, oh, you're never gonna admit to each other. That'll change in a minute. But then we get the scene where Spock's able to mind meld with his mother, and he sort of gets like just a mundane memory, but we learn more about it later on. And I like T'Pring standing up for Spock and Amanda here and just being like, Mom, your opinion was not needed. We just needed to finish this ritual. And I love T'Pring just being a good partner. Like T'Pring has done nothing wrong in my opinion. Like T'Pring is just doing her best during all of this bullshit, and just also just like taking all this crap from her mom, from Spock even. So T'Pring did nothing wrong in this situation and actually kicked butt. So I love T'Pring standing up to her mother there. And then Spock also standing up for his mother, saying, oh, you think a human couldn't have done this? Well, a human did do it. Screw you. In a very Vulcan-like way. And the moment with him and Amanda I thought was beautiful. He was like, now I understand what my mom has had to do and why she's been in strength. It's not her detriment. And I kind of got the same energy from this scene as we got in Star Trek 2009 with Zachary Quinto Spock, where he turned down the Vulcan Science Academy because the Vulcan Science Academy called his mom a disadvantage.
It is truly remarkable, Spock, that you have achieved so much, despite your disadvantage. All rise.
If you would clarify, Minister, to what disadvantage are you referring?
Your human mother.
Council. Ministers, I must decline.
No Vulcan has ever declined admission to this academy.
Then as I am half human, your record remains untarnished.
And the same language is kind of used here in Spock standing up for his mother. I like that I like these echoes across different timelines, sort of thing, between the Kelvin timeline and the Prime timeline here. And this scene was very emotional, and I like Spock sort of standing up for his mother and saying, I see you. I see the strength that you had to endure for all the crap that you had to take as a mother, having to, try to protect her son and putting her son first over her own desire to be seen and heard and respected as a full person. She put that aside so that Spock could get that chance. And so I loved that for Spock and for Amanda. I thought it was a beautiful scene. But then this leads us to T'Pring talking to Spock and saying, why didn't you tell me? And she is absolutely right. Because I understand where Spock was coming from, of not trusting her, but she deserved to be told. And he could have told her at any point during this, not just the moment where she arrived. He could have called her and said, this is what's happening. She's his fiance. He should be able to open up to her and tell her what's going on. And she even said, I accepted your human half too. I would have accepted this. And the fact that he did not trust her speaks to a fundamental distrust in their relationship. And I think T'Pring is right to call that out. And right to sort of put a pause in the relationship, because it is a problem. So again, T'Pring did nothing wrong in this situation, and I think she's absolutely right in this situation. And Spock needs to figure his shit out, let's just say. And so we also get a wonderful final scene between Amanda and Spock, where I really love Spock sort of acknowledging everything I've been talking about. It's like, you were strong, you put aside your needs for mine. And it's a lot of things that parents, do. Not just mothers. We tend to put that on mothers. Like, oh, mothers have to take this on the chin. That's what our society does generally. But parents overall do that. They sacrifice for their child. And I really do, I love this scene of Spock acknowledging that. Because I think Amanda deserved it. Throughout all of her iterations and all of Star Trek iterations from the original series to the Kelvin timeline, I think this is something the character deserved to hear. So I really did love that. I also love Chapel getting a moment to say fuck you to the Vulcan science guy, being like, I don't think you deserve me. And again, shows like Chapel's confidence growing in herself, which I liked that she had this arc separate from Spock as well, because one of my major criticisms of Chapel as a character as depicted really in the original series as well, but here in this show, is that one of her major arcs has always been just like defined by Spock, and her arc is like, do I have feelings for Spock or not? Whereas Spock gets to be a character defined by a little bit more. So I like that while we're still dealing with that arc, and I still have criticisms of Chapel being mainly defined by her relationship to Spock, to the dude character, I do like that she gets other things to do and gets to show confidence elsewhere. Like, I did this thing, screw you. So I like that those beats happen. I want Chapel to have more than just that beyond her relationship with Spock. I hope the character gets to have a little bit more to do outside of just her relationship with Spock. But that being said, I'm glad we get little bits of it here. So that would be a criticism that I have of the show overall, not necessarily this episode, but one that is, not to the detriment overall of the series or the character. But then this brings us to the big moment of the episode, which will probably shock a lot of people, is that Spock and Chapel start kissing. And this will be interesting to see how people take this, because I'm recording this a few weeks before this episode comes out. And for me, if you had told me that Spock and Chapel would have had a relationship prior to the original series, I would have been like, I don't know if I like that, because again, it sort of goes to that like Chapel being defined by Spock sort of thing, and I don't really like that storyline necessarily. But they have made this relationship work so well and added so much depth and nuance to it, and also Spock's conflicted feelings with T'Pring, that I'm actually really excited to see where this goes, and to see if they do mean to add more depth to Chapel's depictions in the original series. Because Chapel's depiction in the original series is always just like, oh, Spock, I love you, I adore you, and Spock never being able to articulate back that to her. And so maybe this will add another layer to that. Or maybe it'll blow up that piece of canon, which is totally fine as well. So I'm curious to see where they're going to go with this, and I'm here for it. Spock needs to figure his shit out. I wish Spock was just polyamorous. If Spock could just be polyamorous and everyone else was down, he could be with T'Pring, he could be with Chapel, he could be with Kirk even, because we all know he has feelings for Kirk. I say jokingly, but as a Kirk/Spock shipper, yes. So yeah, he could just be a little polyamorous little Vulcan boy. It would solve all of his problems and maybe introduce some more ones as well. But yeah, I'm curious to see with this. I really loved that ending. So that's my thoughts on this episode of Strange New Worlds Charades. I loved it. This was great. If episode 2 of the season did not exist, I would say this is my favorite episode of the season so far, because this was wonderful. I always adore the weird, quirky, comedic episodes that have heart to them of Star Trek. While episode 2 is, I think, again, another level, this one is fantastic too. So I love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Did you like this episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds? Let me know. Beyond all of that, I hope you all live long and prosper. I was hoping I would come up with a joke. By the time I put up my hand, I did not. So that's where we're ending.